Hi there. Welcome to Still Learning, the space where we celebrate growth in all its messy, beautiful, and raw forms. I'm your host, Fortune Fowle, and if you're here, you're right where you need to be, because here we're embracing the beauty being works in progress. Therefore, lean in, get comfortable, and let's grow together, one honest conversation at a time. Happy Still Learning Monday, guys. Happy Monday morning. I hope your morning is off to a great start. And I'm really happy that you decided to start your morning off with me. I'm really excited to be able to get into this conversation with you guys today. So far, this last week has been one of reflection, guys. It's Holy Week right now. Yesterday was Good Friday. Today is Holy Saturday, and tomorrow is Easter. And so it's really been a time where I have been intentional about really remembering the Lord and the life that He lived and the life that He gave so that we can have life and just honoring our Savior and just the absolute joy and the greatest display of love that He did for us. I mean, this is the greatest love story of all time, and it's a love story that we're all a part of. Absolutely love this time of the year and know this is something we should remember and reflect on every single day in our walk as Christians is especially beautiful and just such a sacred time period. So that's really what I've been doing this last week, reflecting on, and He has really shown me and helped me really further understand and take a hold of this amazing love that He has for each and every single one of us. But yes, that has been what my last week has really been looking like. And by the time that this episode comes out, Easter would have long gone and passed. But I still want to say happy Easter to anyone who celebrates. And I hope that you had a joyous day. I hope that your outfits and your pictures came out absolutely beautiful because best believe we are taking some photos after church tomorrow. I hope that Easter feast you had was delicious. It's such a good time with all your friends and family, and you were surrounded by loved ones, as this is just a time of celebration. But with that being said, our conversation today is one that is crucial to this current season that we are in, with it being Easter weekend. And it is an idea and concept that I actually have been wanting to talk about for some time now. And it's something that can be a topic that is not necessarily as well received by others, and something that can be hard to really grasp onto and understand. And so, in our conversation, is that the Judas in your life is necessary. Yes, you did hear me right. I said Judas. And if you are a believer in the faith, if you know anything about Judas, specifically Judas Iscariot, because there were two Judas who were disciples, and you're probably thinking, wait, where are we going with this? Are we talking about Judas? The Judas who betrayed Jesus? Is that the one who we are talking about? Is that the one who you are telling me today, Fortune, is necessary in my life? And to answer your question, yes, I am talking about that Judas. Judas Iscariot, not the other Judas, the one who betrayed Jesus, the one who handed him over to be crucified. And I understand in saying that he is necessary, his presence, his betrayal. Yeah, I understand how outrageous that sounds right now. You see, the thing is, we can't talk about Jesus's life, death, and resurrection without mentioning Judas, without mentioning the betrayal that happened and led to his crucifixion. And I know that this particular subject that I'm going to be talking about with you guys today might be one that is going to be hard to accept, one that we're going to have to wrestle with, because in what the Lord has revealed to me through his relationship with Judas is one that is essential for us to really take a hold of the truth and to come to understand further a love that really can't come from us but comes from him. Anytime I think about Jesus and Judas and their relationship dynamic, their friendship, their brotherhood, to be quite honest, is that the betrayal of Judas to Jesus didn't catch Jesus by surprise. In fact, it was every bit of God's plan. Judas' betrayal was a part of God's plan. Judas wasn't a detour. He wasn't random. He was necessary. And coming to that realization that there are some things we will have to endure, pain, betrayal, heartbreak, suffering, not as accidents, not as punishments, but as divine necessities, that's really challenging, really hard to accept and rationalize. Because I don't know about you, but I have been hurt before. I have been betrayed. I have experienced what it's like to have someone you care about deeply turn their back on you. And that kind of pain, it's not fun. And many of you guys listening to this today can agree with me that it's not fun. Probably one of the most difficult things that we will experience in our lives. And whether that betrayal was subtle or obvious, quiet or public, it hurt all the same. So when I look at what unfolded between Jesus and Judas, one thing becomes crystal clear. Jesus knew, and he still loved. And that alone, I couldn't understand for the longest time. And I don't even think I really even understand it now, because I think to myself that if God gave me the foresight to know which people would hurt me, betray me, walk away from me, I'd be like, thank you for the heads up. I'll go ahead and keep my distance. I think any one of us would do that. Avoid the drama, avoid the pain, avoid having to go through the work of healing and seeing a therapist once a week the next 6 months to be able to get through the hardship that you went through. Avoid all of that. But Jesus didn't do that. And what was even strange, or what was strange to me and maybe to some of you guys, is that not only did Jesus not do that, he took it a step further and he invited Judas into his life. He let Judas walk closely with him for 3.5 years. He called him one of the 12. Those were some of the closest people to Jesus. They were his inner circle. He gave Judas a seat at the table where the Last Supper occurred. He washed Judas's feet. He called him friend in the garden. In the very moment that Judas was betraying him, literally, as Judas was looking Jesus in the eye, getting ready to betray him, and Jesus knew that that was happening, he looked at Judas and called him friend. In the midst of betrayal, I don't know how he did it. I know I couldn't do it. And in looking at that moment in Jesus's response, it was one that was not just love. It was divine love. It was a love that costed something. It costed pain. It was a love that didn't depend on how someone treats you, but flows from who you are and who God is. And when I sit with that, like really sit with that, the dynamic between Jesus and Judas, it makes me ask myself, could I ever love like that? Could I forgive like that? Because that is not easy, what Jesus did. But what Jesus shows us is that he didn't just say, love your enemies, because during the time of Jesus's ministry, he brought a new command for his followers. We see this in the Gospels, and it's to love your enemies, which was something that was never spoken before in the Old Testament. I mean, if we look at Psalms and the things that David was writing and praying to God about his enemies, David was definitely one like, Lord, destroy my enemies. I don't think that David necessarily was one who would have immediately hopped on this bandwagon, on this command that Jesus gave us here in the New Testament of loving your enemies. But that is what Jesus said, that if we're going to be his followers, we have to love our enemies. And he didn't just say this, he embodied it. He lived it. He modeled it. And we don't just see him do this with the Pharisees, but we see him do this with someone who was closest to him, who would end up betraying him. We're talking about someone who walked with him. I mean, Judas walked alongside with Jesus. He talked with him. He saw the miracles, heard the sermons, felt the presence, and he sold him out for 30 pieces of silver, which wasn't even that much money, but it was just like in that moment, I'm over here thinking, like, if I was Jesus, I would have been like, you're telling me the last 3.5 years, all that I've done with you, all that we've been through, all that was worth to you, you just chalked that up to 30 pieces of silver? That was all it was worth to you? That was how easy it was for you? It wasn't even like $1 billion, $1 billion. Like, maybe I wouldn't have gotten that, but like, it took so little. You valued me so little. That's how I would have took it if I was Jesus. I don't know how I would have been able to just respond the way that Jesus did. Because Jesus' response to that, it wasn't anger. It wasn't, I'm gonna get even. It wasn't shame or public exposure. It was surrender. Surrender to the will of the Father, because Jesus understood that even betrayal had a place in this story. I really do think that in that moment, Jesus was like, I'll surrender to your betrayal, Judas, because on the other side of this is redemption. And as we sit in Easter weekend, reflecting on the cross, I'm reminded that the crucifixion that occurred wasn't just a political or religious execution and scheme. It was ushered in through betrayal. And Jesus used even that for God's glory. I mean, who would have thought that betrayal can bring glory to God? Like, how? Genuinely, how? How was that possible? Yet we see it happen. And then it makes me think, what if God is doing the same with us? What if he's still working through the heartbreak, the betrayal, the pain we're carrying? And that's hard to just accept and put yourself in a position to be surrendered to. It's not easy, right? I'm not going to lie. It's hard to love people who hurt you. It's hard to forgive when someone breaks your heart. It's hard to forgive when someone breaks your trust. It's even harder when you were nothing but good to them. But Jesus shows us a different way. And Jesus' way is one that the people during that time and the world will fool us into believing is weak, fool us into believing is foolish, when the very thing that Jesus did was not foolish at all. It was the farthest thing from it. And it was the farthest thing from weak. It was strength. Because it takes strength to love someone who doesn't love you back. It takes strength to choose kindness instead of bitterness. And the beautiful thing is, we don't do that in our own strength. We do it in his. See, Jesus did this so that we will come to a point where we are able to do the same. Not in our own strength, but in the strength that he has given us. Through this, Jesus makes it so abundantly clear to us, despite what the world may say, that forgiveness doesn't make you a doormat. Forgiveness frees you. Compassion transforms you. And loving your enemies, it invites you into deeper intimacy with the heart of God. Jesus really walked that out and showed that to us through his relationship with Judas. And that's what made me get to this point of maybe the Judas in your life. No, not maybe, but the Judas in your life is necessary. Not for them, but for you, for who you'll become on the other side of it, for what comes from it. Maybe you have the Judas in your life already. You have that person in mind. I know someone came in mind for some of y'all. I know someone did. And maybe their betrayal, it really hurt. It was really something that you're like, God, I can't ever respond the way that you did. I can't ever forgive this. Do you see how much pain it brought me? But what those moments coming on the other side of them, because 2020 is hindsight, it showed me that their betrayal didn't break me, that I'm actually a lot stronger than I thought. It revealed to me my strength. It clarified my calling. It clarified who I am and the person who I want to become. It brought me closer to God. I mean, in those moments, I was really leaning, sitting, resting in at the feet of Jesus. And I've come to understand that in those moments where it felt like such a great loss, where it felt like I was grieving, now on the other side of it, I see the good in it. I see that it was needed because I wouldn't be who I am today. I wouldn't have the heart. I wouldn't have the character. I wouldn't have the compassion or the empathy that I have now if I didn't decide to respond the way Jesus did. Because when I decided to take up Jesus's response to Judas, I see how through Jesus's interactions with Judas, he didn't ever lash out on him. And he also didn't expose Judas prematurely. Moments before he was going to be crucified, he let the disciples know that one of them would betray him. And all the disciples at the table are like, Jesus, you can't mean me. It can never be me. All of them are like, it's not me. Who could ever betray you, Jesus? Because it was even hard for that to fathom that someone would betray him. And Judas, which it still blows my mind to this day, had the audacity, the literal audacity to look at Jesus and be like, surely you couldn't be talking about me. And again, truly Jesus is Lord, because I know in that moment, I would have flipped over that dining table and been like, excuse me, of course I'm talking about you. You know I'm talking about you. You know you're the one who's going to betray. I would have went off. Like, that was gaslighting. Judas was gaslighting Jesus. I know gaslighting didn't exist then, that term, because it was what, Roman Empire century BC. But listen, that was gaslighting. If I know it, I would have flipped out. But Jesus didn't do that. He remained so calm. He didn't call him out. He just accepted what he said. Jesus, that whole time, despite knowing what would happen, he didn't isolate or avoid Judas. He stayed rooted in love. And that doesn't mean that Jesus wasn't hurt by Judas's actions. He was. He grieved the betrayal. The Bible literally tells us about how he was troubled in the spirit by what would happen. But even in his grief, he chose grace. And that's why in those moments where I have really had to lean on the Lord to help me have his response, to help me to love my enemies. Because Jesus understood what Ephesians 6:12 lets us know is that our enemy is not flesh and blood, but it's those powers and principalities and dark forces in the heavenly realm. He understood that what happened here, it went beyond Judas, right? He understood that there was a darker force at work that was actually the root problem here, and that Judas wasn't the one he was fighting. It was that force behind it. And he knew that his greatest weapon in that moment was to love, was to show grace, was to show mercy, was to show compassion. And because Jesus did that, he made that choice to love instead. And he had that understanding, he had that wisdom that this goes far beyond Judas. That after he was handed over, we come to discover that Judas felt such immense guilt for what he had done. In fact, he tried to return the money and he couldn't. And I wonder if Judas would have felt that remorseful if Jesus didn't respond with love, but instead lashed out and was angry and was cruel and was bitter. But because Jesus' response was love, it made Judas look inward at himself and realize that this is not who he wants to be. He doesn't want to be someone who could have just betrayed and forsaken such a friend in that way. And I just find that as something that can be encouraging to us to do the same, and makes me wonder what would happen if we did the same, if we let the grief come but didn't let it turn into bitterness, if we acknowledged the pain but didn't let it harden our hearts. There's so much to learn and so much more we can take away from this friendship, because till the very end, Jesus still considered Judas a friend. There is power in choosing love in the face of pain. There is healing in forgiveness, even when it's undeserved, even when it's difficult. And maybe, just maybe, the way Jesus responded to Judas is an invitation for all of us to examine how we respond when we're hurt and challenge us that next time we are more intentional about responding like Jesus. I genuinely believe that when we do, we are able to see on the other side that we are someone who we are a lot more proud of, someone who we genuinely want to become. I know that in those times where I made that choice, that conscious effort, and trust me, it was difficult. I really had to lean on the Lord for strength and support to respond like him, to respond in love, to respond in forgiveness, to respond in grace. I become a better version of myself. I'm actually more happy. I'm more joyful in the fact that I didn't allow that to harden my heart. I am more at ease and I feel more peace and more empathy, and I don't feel enraged and I don't feel anger, but I feel this level of love that I know it couldn't stem from me, but it comes from him. And there's such a freedom from that I didn't allow that to darken my heart, to change who I am, to make me become someone who's less loving and less giving, that I didn't allow it to change the person who I want to become, because I want to become someone who's loving and thoughtful and forgiving and generous and compassionate no matter what. And responding like Jesus, it helps me continue to walk out and become that person. Even though it's difficult, I know that it's good and that it works for my good. So yeah, the Judas in our lives, whoever they may be, and honestly, you may have been a Judas at one point. It works on both sides, on both ends. I'm not afraid to admit that I was a Judas at one point as well. And a Judas can cause some real damage, some real hurt, some real pain, but they may also be the very person that God is using to push you into your purpose. Because Judas didn't derail Jesus. He delivered him into his destiny. See, what Judas didn't even know was that he was actually playing a hand in helping Jesus be able to die for our sins and take up it all on the cross, but also lead to the resurrection life that's going to happen 3 days later, that will lead to the salvation of all of humanity and bring freedom from everything that seeks to hold us in captivity. And all of that was able to occur through the betrayal of a friend. Oh, how the Lord is so intentional in showing us through his lifetime to the very end a love that is sacrificial, a love that knows no depths, that makes it possible to love those who don't love you back, to love those who hurt you, and to be able to look at them and say, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing. And that is worth remembering, that even in the worst moments, love still conquers it all, and that in everything, God's love is still at work in the midst of the pain, hurt, betrayal, and he's working it all out for our good. So I hope that in our conversation today, your heart has softened along the way. Your mind was a bit more open. I know some of you guys may have been a bit skeptical in the beginning of this conversation when I said that Judas in your life is necessary. I mean, that is a hard pill to swallow, someone telling you that betrayal and pain is a necessary thing you have to endure in this life. But I hope you are able to see that on the other side is good. On the other side, there's hope. And on the other side, there's love. Because in the hands of Jesus, even betrayal has a purpose, and even pain can lead to resurrection. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode of Still Learning. If you're currently carrying a Judas moment right now, just know it's not the end of your story. And I hope through this conversation today, it provided you hope and encouragement that it just might be the beginning of your becoming. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with a friend. And if you're not already, make sure to follow Still Learning Pod on Instagram. I'd love to hear your thoughts and continue this conversation with you. If you're enjoying the podcast, leave a rating or review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as it helps others find this space and keep this community growing. And last but not least, remember, what it is now is not what it will always be or what it will become. Stay encouraged, stay rooted in truth, and I'll see you next time for another episode of Still Learning.